Hey everyone, I'm Pat Fitzmaurice, managing editor of Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros, and this is my first installment of the season-long player props videos. I'm going to run through all of my favorite player props for week one, and hopefully you'll piggyback me on a few of these and we'll both win lots of money. But first I have to tell you, if you want a chance to win a signed Joe Mixon Cincinnati Bengals jersey, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. And by the way, you also need to check out the BettingPros.com site, bookmark BettingPros.com, and also download the Betting Pros app. You'll get abundant betting advice for a wide variety of sports, especially football. And you can sync up with online sports books, track your bets. We have betting calculators, betting tutorials, prop bet analyzers, and if you're watching this video, I know you want to check out our player props cheat sheet, which is great for highlighting optimal plays. All right, let's get to it. And by the way, last year's record, 58-41, not too shabby, but hey, I think we can even do a little better than that winning percentage. Let's get to it. Trey Lance, under 204.5 passing yards. Look, I'm a Trey Lance enthusiast for fantasy, although I'm more bullish on his running ability than his passing ability. I do think he's a great investment for fantasy, and generally, I am not going to be betting many unders where the Bears' pass defense is concerned. It is not very good, but this week is an exception because Lance didn't perform especially well in training camp. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Shanahan kept the training wheels on a bit for week one, called a conservative game, and the 49ers are 7-point road favorites. Need to take a lot of chances throwing the ball downfield, and they may well be without George Kittle, who got some sort of groin injury earlier in the week, might be out, which would certainly not brighten Trey Lance's passing outlook. And most important of all, there is a forecast of rainfall, possibly heavy rainfall in the Chicago area Sunday. If we're getting a lot of rain, that's definitely going to dampen, so to speak, the passing outlook for both teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if this number came down in the run-up to the game as more people became aware of the weather situation. But I would still bet this as low as about 195.5 yards. Right now it's at 204.5 as of Thursday, but I think it might come down in the days to come. So hammer that Trey Lance under. One over I like for passing is Jameis Winston over 226.5 yards. You might recall that the Saints opened the 2021 season very conservatively with the play calling. Jameis did not throw more than 23 passes in any of the Saints' first four games, and averaged 21.5 pass attempts over that span. But then they loosened the reins a bit, and he threw 30 and 35 passes in games 5 and 6 before tearing his ACL in game 7. So part of that, however, was the state of the Saints pass catchers, which was not good. I mean, Marquez Callaway led the team in targets last year with 84, and Deontay Hardy was second among wide receivers with 59. So this was a bad group of pass catchers last year. Understandable the Saints would want to be run heavier and conservative, but things are different now. Jarvis Landry signed as a free agent in the offseason. Chris Olave drafted in the first round. And Michael Thomas is back. Well, maybe he's back. So he is apparently over his foot injury, but has been dealing with the hamstring issue. His status is unclear for week one, although he did take part in a team walkthrough on Monday, which is an encouraging sign. So more firepower here for Jameis as far as his pass catchers. The Falcons gave up about 240 passing yards a game last season. I think Jameis is going to get over this total. But I would forgive you for staying away from this game if Michael Thomas is ruled out. Let's go to rushing totals. And I really like Joe Mixon over 70.5 yards. The Steelers' run defense was horrible last year. How bad? To use a clinical term, it was hot garbage juice. The Steelers were trampled for the second most rushing yards of any team in football last year. Only the Houston Texans gave up more rushing yards. And I think the Texans had more of an excuse because they were facing negative game scripts more often than the Steelers. And how did the Steelers go about fixing their run defense in the offseason? Well, they spent a first-round pick on an overaged, one-year wonder quarterback. So they really didn't. And last year, Joe Mixon, 2 meetings against the Steelers. First meeting, 18 carries, 90 yards, no touchdowns. Second meeting, 28 carries, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I love the over here on Mixon, especially with the Bengals having upgraded their offensive line dramatically. I mean, Mixon smashed against this Pittsburgh defense last year, and that was with a shaky offensive line. Now he's got a pretty good offensive line in front of him. Bang the over here hard. For a rushing under, I'm not too keen on Tony Pollard at 30.5 rushing yards. I'm betting the under here. I'm generally a Pollard fan, but just not this week. It's tough to run against Tampa Bay. The Bucs allowed the fewest rushing attempts and the fewest rushing yards of any team in the league in 2021. Opponents sometimes don't even bother trying to run the ball on defensive tackle Vita Vea, linebacker Levante David, and the rest of that group. They've even further strengthened that defensive line by adding Akeem Hicks from the Bears. And when we saw the Cowboys face the Buccaneers in the 2021 season opener, Ezekiel Elliott played 70 offensive snaps in that game. Pollard only 20. And I think part of that is because the Cowboys decided they weren't even going to bother running the ball. They were going to attack the Buccaneers through the air, and they trust Zeke more as a pass blocker. So he played a lot of snaps, but only ran it 11 times. Pollard ran it only 3 times for 11 yards. I think we could see something similar this year. So I don't think Pollard gets to even 30.5 rushing yards. I'm betting the under. Let's move over to wide receivers. I really like A.J. Brown over 64.5 yards receiving in his debut with the Eagles. My boss, Matt Friedman, he really likes this bet too, so I'm sort of obligated to like it. No, not really. I'm betting it on my own volition. So as Friedman notes, though, Brown averages an eye-popping 10.2 yards per target for his career, and he is going against a soft group of outside cornerbacks for the Lions. And he's also, weather protected. This game is going to be in Detroit under the roof. Lions cornerback Jeffrey Okudah has allowed 2.28 yards per coverage snap and 12.6 yards per target over his brief career, while Lions cornerback Amani Oruwariye, I think I pronounced that correctly, has allowed 1.20 yards per coverage snap and 9.1 yards per target over his career. Those are bad numbers. These guys are really burnable. And wouldn't you think the Eagles would want to get A.J. Brown heavily involved in his first game with the team? I think so too. I'm banging the over here, 64.5. Another over I like, Mike Williams, 56.5 yards. That's a pretty modest total for a dude who through 5 games in 2021 was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy and half-point PPR formats. What did those numbers amount to? Through 5 games last year, Williams had 51 targets, 31 catches, 471 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Then he tweaked his knee in week 5, was kind of slowed for the next 5 or 6 weeks before getting his act together again towards the end of the season. And the last time we saw him on the field was the 2021 regular season finale. Williams was up against his opponent in week 1 now, the Raiders, and Williams had 9 catches for 119 yards and a touchdown on 17 targets. Now he's back at the Raiders again, and I think he is a mismatch for either of the Raiders' outside cornerbacks, Rock Ya-Sin or Anthony Averett. And one final bet here, I like the under on Robbie Anderson, 32.5 receiving yards. Look, any chance I can fade a guy who I consider to be a bad player, I'm going to take it. And I consider Robbie Anderson to be a bad player. Last year, Robbie averaged 9.8 yards per catch, 4.7 yards per target, and caught only 48.2% of the throws in his direction. Those are really bad numbers. And mind you, those numbers came with Christian McCaffrey largely out for this season. So I think there's a chance Robbie is really marginalized in the Panthers attack this year. We know DJ Moore is the alpha receiver in Carolina. McCaffrey is certainly going to get his share of targets too. They've brought in Laviska Shenault. So I don't see Robbie playing a very big role. And he's going to be going up against a Browns secondary that is brimming with young cornerback talent. Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Greg Newsome. The Browns have plowed a lot of draft capital into their cornerbacks. These guys are good. Do not touch Robbie this week in fantasy and pound the under on him. 32.5 receiving yards. So that's it. 7 bets to get us rolling into the 2022 prop bet season, my friends. Hope you enjoy all the action this weekend, and good luck on those wagers.